Hey, what's up, everybody? We're back with another preview for you. This time we're covering rookies. Let's get right into it, guys. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
So my strategy in these redraft leagues, redraft league is your typical league where you're not having any keepers. I typically avoid rookies, especially early in the draft. Sometimes I'll take a flyer on a guy late in the draft. But what's your overall approach towards rookies in these drafts where you don't have any keepers?
I agree with you. I think that rookies are way overhyped. We've seen year by year the interest in the NFL draft has gone up and up and up. And it's created a monster. It's created all of a sudden all these fantasy players used to be they knew the name of 4 or 5 rookies. Now they know the name of 20 or 30 rookies. Half of them aren't even projected to be starters this year, but they've seen them in college. They've seen the tape. Man, they can't wait to draft them onto their fantasy team. And most of them don't pan out to be anything. So I agree with you. I'm much more interested in what kind of situation is a rookie getting himself into, as opposed to what his college highlight film looked like.
Yeah, so Joe, I know you want to do a whole show on Jordan Matthews, but what is your overall strategy in regards to rookies? Try not to spend like 10 minutes talking about just Jordan Matthews.
Well, I mean, if I could get Jordan Matthews to leave the outgoing message on my voicemail, that would be pretty awesome. But no, I'm with you guys. I mean, rookies are way overhyped. A really good season as a rookie is going to be like 1,000 yards. You know, guys like A.J. Green, Calvin Johnson. I think A.J. Green maybe barely cracked 1,000 yards in his rookie year. Calvin Johnson didn't. But that's, you can't expect, some guys are taking the Sammy Watkins in the third round or something like that. That's just ridiculous. Or a Mike Evans. Why not wait till the 14th round? You'll get the same production out of a
Oh,
Brian Hartline or something like
I
that.
thought
You
you
know
were
what
gonna
I'm
say Jordan
saying?
Matthews.
It's sexy to take rookies. There's unlimited potential because you don't know what he can do. But you look around the league and you'll find a veteran guy who's going to produce you exactly the same numbers, probably about 5 rounds later. That's as far as wide receivers. When it comes to tight ends, you don't even bother with rookie tight ends. They almost, other than Gronk, I can't think of one who was highly, drafted. Gronk wasn't even very highly drafted, but rookie tight ends almost never pan out until you get to running backs is when it gets a bit interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. Wide receivers is the big red flag for me. Tight ends, yeah, it's not even a red flag. It's you shouldn't even look at them at all. And then with rookie running backs, it's more about the situation, kind of what Dave talked about a little bit. It's more about the situation than even the talent a lot of times. It's whoever has the best shot at a starting job. If you can project a rookie to get a lot of carries, then you're in business. But you can look at last year where everyone, including myself, thought Monte Ball was in a great spot in that Denver offense, in line to get a lot of carries, and he didn't end up getting the carries. A lot of times you run into running backs not being able to pass block. Although that wasn't the case with Monte Ball was actually on the field more than Noshawn Moreno in pass plays. But for some reason, coaches just don't trust the rookies as much in certain situations. So it's something you've got to be wary of. If I were to take a chance on a rookie in those, mid rounds, say round 5 or so, it would be a running back, no doubt. I'm not taking a rookie wide receiver there. But let's get into some specific players, some examples this year. I think the earliest rookie I would take is Bishop Sankey, and I'm looking at him in about the 6th round or so, the 5th round or so. But the problem is he usually goes before that because even though I believe his value is right there, like Dave said, the hype takes over and people just get too excited about the potential, the great unknown. So Dave, who's the number one rookie that you're looking at? Who's the earliest one you draft?
Well, I do agree with you that Sankey clearly is the guy that's in the best situation, is the most obvious choice, I think, as a guy who will produce a little something for you. But I just see him as in a very limited ceiling situation where they do have Sean Green there already, so it's not like he's going into a situation where he's going to play all the time. I think they're going to play Green, a fair amount of the time anyway. The rookie that I'm most interested in, and I'm curious to see, where he's going as we get more information on more of these drafts, is Cooks of the Saints. He's a guy that, if he's, the Saints obviously are a great passing team. Nobody spreads the ball around better than Breeze, and yet the quality of their receivers is not really good. I mean, Colston's a good wideout, but we've seen Lance Moore. We've seen a lot of different guys, lesser name guys, come through and have decent seasons. I think he could be, before long, their number 2 receiver. Remember, they also lost Sproles as a similar type of receiver. Now, Sproles wasn't a wideout, but he was a small guy, caught short passes, ran long distances, and I think that's what they see Cooks going into that role. He's not highly regarded. I'd be in no hurry to draft him, but I'm in no hurry to draft any rookies. So he's the one that I'm most interested in.
Joe, I know you like Cooks too. Why don't you talk about him, the earliest you would take him? And as I've said earlier in the show, we did probably a good 10 minutes on Jordan Matthews in both the wide receiver and the sleeper section. So if anyone wants Joe's thoughts on Jordan Matthews, please check those out. We'll try to cover some more guys this time. So tell me a little bit about Brandon Cooks here.
Well, just to give some background, I'm a bit of an NFL draft junkie. I follow everything leading up to it. I attend the NFL draft. So I scout the rookies a lot. Those were both guys that I liked going into the draft who landed themselves in good situations, talking about Cooks and Matthews. The problem is once Cooks went to New Orleans, he ended up on everybody's radar. I think the potential is there. I think he's fast. They like him a lot. They've been looking, for a guy like that. He very nicely will fit into the Sproles role in that offense, where it's not as difficult it won't be as difficult for him as it will be for some of the other receivers, where they're just gonna, get the ball in his hands on quick hits, bubble screens, something like that. So he'll be a high reception guy. I think he's a very safe pick. I'd be looking at him about the 6th round, maybe 7th round. But the problem is the hype is there, like Dave said. He's going before that. I won't own Cooks in any single-year leagues. And then, you're looking at Watkins, Evans, very much the same story. I believe those guys will not produce as well as Cooks and Matthews, but will be drafted higher than them. Again, guys, I won't end up owning. I think you're in for a big mistake if you're planning on those guys being, your high-end wide receiver 2s. I think that's gonna make a very difficult job for your team. And then to talk about Sankey, I'm not as worried as Dave about Sean Green. I had a hard time placing Sankey when we did our rankings because I think the situation is ideal. I just don't think he's an elite talent. Had he been, switched with Hyde in the draft, had they done what they were supposed to do and taken Hyde over Sankey, I'd be looking at Hyde as probably a top 12 running back given that opportunity. I've got Sankey at 15. That might even be a little high just because he's not a very high-level talent. I think he was probably the 3rd best running back in the draft this year.
So would you have taken Hyde in the 2nd or 3rd round then if he went to Tennessee instead?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. As much as I just talked about not wanting to take rookies early, like I said, you can look for value or you can look for the right situations to project a very good season for them. So let's talk about Hyde then and Devontae Freeman. I think those are another couple rookies that are very interesting to people based on their situation. You have Steven Jackson, who's been banged up in training camp, getting up there in age, of course, didn't have a very productive season last year, and Devontae Freeman comes along, is starting to get a lot of hype. You've got Hard Knocks on HBO that always generates hype for whatever team they're covering, so everyone gets excited about the players during training camp. And Devontae Freeman's not necessarily a guy on my radar because of all those things. I knew that the stuff like Hard Knocks was going to rise his ADP, and the knowledge of Steven Jackson was going to, I think, just make him too overhyped for me. But with Carlos Hyde, I think it's the opposite. Everyone's kind of just has pushed him to the back burner all year, knowing that Marcus Lattimore was there and all the depth that the Niners had at running back. But now with a couple injuries to Kendall Hunter and LaMichael James, all of a sudden that running back situation is a little more clear for Carlos Hyde to get more carries, and I can't see anyone getting the ball around the goal line besides Carlos Hyde. So I'm looking at Carlos Hyde, but he's not a guy that you have to take early at all. As I said, you can wait till the 10th, 12th round and get a nice rookie with a lot of upside, a guy that Joe would be willing to take in a second or third round if he was in a better situation. So, Dave, get in here and talk about some of these rookie running backs. Out of the guys I'm talking about, who would you prefer, Devontae Freeman or Carlos Hyde?
Actually, I have no interest in either one of them, and the reason is that, like I said before, I just don't like either situation. I'm looking for, I mean, other than someone like Sankey, who's going to come in and we know almost for sure he's going to be the starter from day one, I don't think you're going to find any other rookies in that situation short of there being an injury, and there could be, that could happen any day. So that's something that, as you prepare for your draft, you have to be up with the news. Because, for example, the guy that I think has as much potential as anybody, but it would take an injury for him to get his shot, is Kadeem Carey. He would go right in there for Forte into a very explosive offense. I thought Carey in the Pac-10 was a better running back than Sankey. He's just not in the situation where he's going to be a starter. But if something were to happen to Forte, I think Carey would go in there and immediately be a fantasy starting back. Can you project an injury to Forte? No, you can't. He's a workhorse type. He's not a type that gets injured. So I'm not recommending Carey that much. I'm just saying that it's that kind of news that I'm waiting for before jumping on any of these guys. That's my biggest concern about Hyde. Hyde's playing behind as durable a back as there is. I mean, Frank Gore over the years just runs and runs and runs. And every year the 49ers talk about, man, we need to get him off the field more. We need to get guys in there to spell him. And they've tried. You said they drafted Lattimore. Now they've drafted Hyde. They've tried other guys. It never seems to happen. And short of Gore getting injured, which, like I said, I have a hard time projecting, I don't see Hyde being a worthy guy of having on your roster. Now, Freeman's in a slightly different situation. You mentioned already that Steven Jackson is a guy who is injury prone. You can project the fact that he's going to get injured. In fact, he kind of already is. But the difference there is that Freeman isn't even necessarily the number 2 back there, because Jaquez Rogers has experience. He's not a great back, but he has experience. I think from the get-go, if an injury were to happen to Jackson, let's say this week, I think Rogers would move into the number 1 position. That would create more playing time for Freeman, but it still wouldn't make him the starter, as opposed to Hyde. If something were to happen to Gore, I think Hyde would go right in there. So that's why I don't like either one of those guys. And in a nutshell, that's why I really don't like any of the running backs this year, is that it's hard for me to project a lot of playing time for any of them other than Sankey.
Yeah, for me, I hate to play coach, but you run into a lot of trouble doing that. But I can't see anyone but Devontae Freeman being the fit for a primary back role. The other running backs they have are more of change of pace type guys. So I'm not too worried about the competition besides Steven Jackson. And like you said, with the injuries there, there's a good chance that Devontae Freeman could end up being a starting running back there. But how about, we've talked about in previous shows Cam Newton's situation and how he doesn't have anyone to throw to, but they did draft a wide receiver early in Kelvin Benjamin, and his measurables are pretty impressive. He's a 6'5", 240-pound wide receiver, so he's going to be a red zone threat. He was taken the first round, so you'd expect that they'd want to see what they can get out of him early. It's not like they're going to, he's not really going to be a project for them, I imagine. So he would be a guy that if he fell, I would be interested in taking. Again, not going to reach on him early, not even going to look at him in the 7th, 8th round, more so in the double-digit rounds. Once you get into 10, 12, around there, a guy like Kelvin Benjamin, Marquise Lee as another one. Marquise Lee, 2 years ago, was one of the highest touted wide receiver prospects in college history. People were comparing him to Calvin Johnson. Totally different body types. Marquise Lee is a small guy, but as far as his talents as a wide receiver, everyone was raving about Marquise Lee. Go into last year, he ends up having a ton of drops, having a really poor season, and everyone sort of kind of just forgot about him. He fell to the second round, I believe, right? Wasn't it early second round, Joe?
Yeah,
Marquise Lee
yeah.
got taken in. So now he's not the big hype guy like the Sammy Watkins, but if he would have been in the draft last year, he would be Sammy Watkins right now. So Marquise Lee's another guy I'm looking at, a really high risk, high reward type guy. Not a lot of competition for him to get on the field there in Jacksonville with Blackman suspended and Cecil Shorts being really the only wide receiver there. So Joe, talk to me about some other rookies, maybe ones we've talked about or ones we haven't.
I'm with Dave on Kadeem Carey. I had him as the second best back in the draft. Now, the difference between him and those other guys is he's a handcuff to a very high level guy. You don't necessarily, need to handcuff your lower end guys, your Gores and your Steven Jacksons, but you're talking about Forte, a guy you're taking, as we all sort of agree, probably in the top 5. So if you're the guy who takes Forte, Kadeem Carey is a very important handcuff for you. I think, like Dave says, if he gets on the field, he can produce, especially in that offense. So I think you will need to spend probably, if you're the Forte guy, maybe an 8th or 9th round pick on Carey to make sure that you have that handcuff. Talking Devontae Freeman, I kind of agree with Dave there too. I mean, obviously, yeah, Steven Jackson's not a model of health, but if something happens to Jackson, are him and Jacquizz Rodgers sort of splitting everything? I'm not sure even if how much opportunity he'll have. I'm not sure he's a great runner, even if he gets a lot of opportunity, if he's going to produce what you're looking for.
Yeah, for me, it's the ADP that scares me away from Freeman, but I do think he would get the opportunity if Steven Jackson went down. But go ahead, sorry to cut you off.
That may be possible. I'm just not sure he's not. I mean, an elite back. I think he would need high volume of carries in order to produce good numbers for his ADP. I'm not sure he's a premier back. I do agree with you on Kelvin Benjamin. The problem is I don't think he's going to be a consistent producer of receptions and yards. So you're only hoping for touchdowns, which come and go. That can be frustrating if he scores 2 touchdowns one week, you plug him in his lineup, in your lineup the next week, and he gets 3 catches for 30 yards. It may be a bit of hit and miss or whack-a-mole going on there. So that's what worries me a bit about Kelvin Benjamin. One guy we haven't mentioned, another guy too, like Dave said, pretty much all these guys are lacking opportunity. Andre Williams looks like a pretty decent running back so far, but Rashad Jennings has played even better. So I think he may have the largest role cut out for him initially. He may be in like a 70-30 split. Something like that, where he's getting 30% of the carries. Again, you're looking for an injury to Rashad Jennings in order for him to step into that role. If he were to become the starter, though, due to injury, I believe he could play well also.
Okay, let's get into guys we don't like. Dave, number 1 guy to avoid, rookies.
Well, can I say all of them?
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel, so I'm with you.
Let me put it this way. I would say all running back. I do agree with Joe. If you had to ask me who my favorite running back was going into the season, I would say it's Williams of the Giants, just because he came in as number 3. Already Wilson is out probably for the rest of his career. He's moved up to number 2, and the guy he's behind is basically a career backup. I mean, yeah, he started for the Raiders last year. It's like starting for the JVs. So they brought him into New York to be. Is Rashad Jennings really going to be a star running back in New York? That's hard for me to believe. And Williams in the first preseason game got off to a real nice start. The fans are already calling for him. But my point is, if he's my favorite of all the running backs, man, I really don't like any of the running backs. And this gets us back to something we've talked about on other videos, where I just think the depth at wide receiver is so far greater than the depth at running back. And I think it translates to rookies. I think you could make a case for 10 different wide receivers who have the potential to make a mark this season. Not necessarily a big one, but I do think, because some guys were drafted as a number 2, some guys were drafted as a number 3. These guys are going to get playing time right from the get-go, as opposed to these running backs where, other than Sankey, maybe none of them will. So, getting back to your question, which guy do I not like the most? I would have to say, Bortles would be a guy who I would definitely not draft. I mean,
Yeah.
if you ask me we haven't talked about quarterbacks at all. If you ask me to rank the rookie quarterbacks, I would definitely put Manziel number one. Not because he's a better quarterback than either Bridgewater or Bortles or Carr or any of these guys, but because you know the fantasy game, the quarterback who's able to scramble, who's able to make something with his feet, score a touchdown, kind of what Manziel did his whole college career. That guy's going to score points. I think of Manziel similar to Pryor of the Raiders. Not a good quarterback, but remember the game last year against the Steelers where Pryor ran 90-some-odd yards for a touchdown on like the very first play of the game? I mean, Manziel does that, and immediately it's like, man, I'm glad I had him in the lineup. He just outscored every quarterback going today except for 10 guys, and I just don't see – Bortles definitely doesn't have that potential. Bridgewater might, but I don't like the offense Bridgewater's in. So to answer your question, I would say Bortles would be number one on that list, and a guy you've talked about, I have no interest in drafting Sammy Watkins. I don't like his quarterback in terms of being able to throw the ball. I think he's in a good situation, but I just don't see Buffalo being a great passing team. And as the number one wide receiver selected in the draft, I think he's going to be overhyped. He is overhyped, and I'm going to let somebody else take him.
Yeah, I can't see. Well, until this draft I'm in right now, I couldn't see ever having Sammy Watkins on my team. But I'm in the 7th round right now, and he still is on the board. So if he falls around to that range, I could see taking him as essentially your 4th wide receiver, 5th wide receiver or so. But besides that, I'm with you, Dave. His ADP is typically in the 4th round or so, which is way too high. You're taking him over guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Terrence Williams, lots of guys that you know you're going to get production out of it. In regards to Johnny Manziel, I agree with you that he's going to be good fantasy-wise, but I don't think he's going to win the job to start off with. So I don't think he's draftable right now. I think if you draft him, you're essentially wasting a roster spot for however many weeks until he wins the job. And to me, the roster spots are typically too valuable unless it was a really deep league where I had a lot of bench spots. I'm not drafting Manziel, but come on the waiver wire when Manziel wins that job, or as you start to see it becoming a possibility, that's where I'm going to spend my waiver dollars or my high waiver wire spot to grab a Manziel.
I'll argue the other side of that, which is especially if your draft is early. If you're drafting now, I mean really early in the preseason where we don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback or what. To me, one of the most important elements of any fantasy football season is the waiver wire process after week 1. We learn more in week 1 of the NFL season than we learn in the entire preseason. We finally see who's going to be the starters, who's going to get how many touches, and that's at the point you really need to reshape your roster. So the fact that if you take Manziel today as your backup quarterback, one of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to win the job and you're going to be happy to have him, or he's not going to win the job and he's going to be a roster spot that you'll gladly give up on, knowing that week 1 you want to have some guys on your roster to get rid of in order to get some of these week 1 stars. So I think if you wait till after he plays week 1, and especially if he does anything, then you might be last in line to get him, and maybe you don't even get him. So why not waste your last draft pick now on him, knowing that all you're going to do is keep him for 1 week, and then you can get rid of him at that point?
Yeah, I'm saying that I don't think there's any chance he wins the job in week 1, and there is a chance that he ends up winning it mid-season. So, I mean, literally, I would say is disclaimer: we're shooting the show after week 1 of the preseason, in between week 1 and week 2. So we have some limited information here, but from what I understand, I think Hoyer pretty much has that job locked down, save for except some amazing performance in these next couple weeks by Manziel here. But that being said, this is a living, breathing thing, the preseason, so that could change a lot. Joe, jump in here. You've been on the sidelines for a while, so talk about Manziel maybe a little bit. And then my original question was, who's the number 1 rookie that you'd avoid based on his ADP?
I think yeah, Watkins, Evans are both very good guys to avoid based on their ADP. Like I mean, if you're saying seventh round, that makes some sense. He could post 900 yards. Talking about Watkins, but he's probably someone you're looking at maybe a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3, maybe this year. But if he's being drafted as a wide receiver 2, that's an absolute mistake. You're hoping for him to really come out and do well with a subpar quarterback. Um, and Manziel and Bridgewater, I like them both long term. Again, Jeff's right. I mean, Bortles probably is a guy who will have the starting job week 1. The other two won't. I don't like Bortles regardless. I don't think he's going to be a good quarterback. As far as Manziel, yeah, you're right. I don't think he will win the job because, the coaches want somebody, they want Hoyer. He's experienced. They know him. He knows the system. The problem is if they start out 1-3 and Hoyer's struggling, it's no longer the coach's decisions. It'll become the fans' decision. They'll make a ton of noise, and they'll make sure that Johnny Football gets in the game. So you're right about that. Unfortunately for me, typically, with worst to first waivers, when week 4 comes, I don't have. I've got the 12th waiver priority, so I've got to make a move on a guy before he blows up or wins a starting job. So I'll either have to draft him a week ahead of time, or pick him up a week ahead of time, or have him already on my team. But man, so I just don't think. I mean, I think if he goes in the game, even Pryor last year. I mean, there was a couple times where it was okay to start Pryor. Obviously, I think Johnny Manziel is a lot better than Pryor, but there's gonna be other options. I think I wouldn't necessarily draft Johnny Manziel. I think you'll be able to get matching production, even if it's not him off the waiver wire. A guy I mentioned yesterday, like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, maybe a Sam Bradford. Really low level guys you can find on the waiver wire. I don't think you need to dedicate a roster spot to a quarterback that's that far down the line.
Yeah, so who's the rookie you're avoiding? I guess you're saying Sammy Watkins and Evans? Yeah.
I'll lump them in together. I think they're both overdrafted. I think they will be. I mean, looking at it, they're probably the 3rd or 4th, the 3 and 4 rookie receivers for me. I think Matthews and Cooks will outperform them. If you really want to have a rookie on your team, grab one of those guys a few rounds later versus taking Evans and Watkins.
Yeah,
Jeff, didn't you say he could only mention Matthews one time on this show?
I know. How many times is that? That's like 7, right? It's ridiculous.
I'm going on a picnic with Jordan Matthews after this show.
Here's my thoughts, by the way, on Evans compared to Watkins. I think Evans is in a lot better situation for 2 reasons. Number one, I like his quarterback a lot more. And number 2, Evans will not be the number 1 receiver. Vincent Jackson is going to be the guy that gets the double teams. He's an elite or lower end elite receiver who's going to draw most of the attention. I think Evans is going to be single covered. He's a tall target. We know that the quarterback likes throwing the ball up to tall targets, single covered. I think he's got a better chance to be successful than Watkins does as the clear-cut number 1 receiver, really the only guy among the wideouts and tight ends on the Bills that you need to worry about. I think he's going to see a lot of traffic everywhere he goes.
Fair enough. I just looked up to Joe's point, the comparison between Terrell Pryor and Johnny Manziel. Terrell Pryor last year didn't have a game above 22 points, so that's a pretty fair point by Joe. If you're projecting Johnny Manziel to be like a Terrell Pryor type, then you're probably not getting very much quarterback 1 production out of him. So I don't know that Dave and I neither use that as the direct comparable to Johnny Manziel, but
I think Dave
it's definitely interesting.
Well, my point on Manziel is that my thinking is, first off, I want to draft a quarterback early on. I would love to have one of the top 3 quarterbacks. Okay, if I get one of those 3, I am not going to draft a backup quarterback. There is no reason to. The backup, the guys on the ADP list, 11 to 20. There's only a couple of guys I'd want on my roster, but I'm never going to play them if I have Rodgers or Breeze or Manning. I mean, never. So why waste the roster spot knowing that there's going to be 10 of these guys, slightly lesser talents than your guys ranked 11 to 20, but there's going to be 10 of these guys on the waiver wire each week, and if you have to dip down there on a bye week or whatever, you can go down there and get him. The only reason I would recommend taking a Manziel ahead of a Fitzpatrick, or I mentioned Tannehill yesterday, kind of your stereotypical mid-pack backup quarterbacks is the fact that we know with these veteran guys kind of what to expect from them. We know they're the very low ceiling. They'll give you a little something, but they probably won't give you much. I have no interest in that. I'd rather use my last pick or second to last pick on a guy who I think has a boomer bust kind of guy, and that's why I would consider Manziel, if he's available, that late in the draft rather than have to go a couple of rounds earlier and take one of these mid-level backups that I think has very limited potential.
Fair enough. The guy that I would avoid would be Eric Ebron for reasons we discussed very early on in the show. Never draft a rookie tight end. It's a big mistake. They very rarely work out. Jimmy Graham's numbers as a rookie, 31 catches, 356 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's the best tight end in the game right now. So you're not going to get much out of rookie tight ends. If you do, you've got lucky. So Eric Ebron is coming off as around the 13th tight end this year, and that is a big mistake. So I think that pretty much wraps it up, guys. Thank you for coming on. I'd give you the last word, but I think we pretty much covered anything, so no reason to be redundant. But everyone needs to check out our other videos on fantasycontrarians.com. They're also posted on blog.fanmouth.com. Lots of really good stuff there, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.